Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Cecilia, and on behalf of OTC Markets, as well as our co-host, Social Suite, we're very pleased you've joined us for our next live presentation from Sabre Gold Mines, a diversified gold producer in North America. Please note you can submit questions in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I am very pleased to welcome Andrew Alinsky, President and CEO of Sabre Gold Mines, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol SGLDF and on the TSXV under the symbol LGLD. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you, team. Welcome, everybody. As Cecilia mentioned, my name is Andrew, President and CEO of Sabre Gold Mines. And I'm going to take you through my presentation, but we're not going to stick to the slides rigidly today. I'll be giving you a bit of background as to what we've been working on, where we're headed, and where I've come from myself, and what I intend to do with the company. Sabre Gold Mines, for those of you who are not familiar, consists primarily of two assets and two projects with near-term production potential. They're past-producing mines, one in the Yukon and one in Arizona. Brewery Creek was a prior gold mine operating in the 90s. It was fully reclaimed back in the 90s and reclaimed in the early thousands, which has a PEA completed on it about a year and a half ago. And the Copperstone Gold Mine was a open pit operation and then moved underground again in the 90s and early thousands. That was not fully reclaimed. It was partially reclaimed and maintained all its permits. And looking at putting that an underground potential there, in which a PEA was completed just a few weeks ago. These assets are very well known and have been extensively worked on for the last 10 years post-production scenarios. And effectively, I have come in the last few months, last 8 to 9 months, to see what I can do about consolidating that work and putting them forward, and seeing what I can do with the company in terms of actually taking this towards production. My background, I'm an accountant by trade, but I spent 10 years working for a mid-sized mining company. Started out small and ended up going into production, doing a number of corporate items as well as on the ground exploration and project management, as well as representing a company with government relations and community relations as well. And so Sabre Gold was the amalgamation of two companies, Arizona Gold and Golden Predator, which were put together a couple of years ago and brought these two assets together. Company was focused on bringing Copperstone in production, but like a number of companies, always underestimate the timeline to actually do that. But have been working diligently towards bringing Copperstone into production. We had a PFS completed on it in 2018, and was working extensively in the 5 years since then to move that forward. Company lost a little bit of momentum last year and really needed a reorganization, and that was why I was brought on. My background as an accountant doing corporate items and restructurings, as well as financings, as well as my experience on the ground with managing projects and operations. Really, that was the attraction from the company's perspective and the board's perspective. And my attraction really was to these two key assets that the company has, and really the stage that they're at, and the ability and the feasibility to take these to production in the near term. I'm happy to say, as I said, I'm in about my 8th or 9th month since joining. We have made significant progress since joining. We have effectively spent the first few months looking at stabilizing the company. The company found itself with a balance sheet that was less than optimal, to say the least. We had a significant number of shares outstanding post merger between the two companies, which should have been addressed. We ended up with a sizable amount of payables and not so much of a bank balance to match off with those. In addition, the company had structured itself throughout development and exploration with debt, as well as setting up a stream on one of the assets. So effectively, a less than ideal situation. Why am I telling you this? I mean, obviously, I've been brought on to correct that. So I spent the first three to 4 months addressing those right out of the gate. We did recapitalize the company via a non-core asset sales. I got a couple of them, a small financing, We also consolidated the share count to a more realistic number, less than 70 million shares outstanding. And with those non-core asset sales and the recapitalization of the company, we reduced the company's debt profile to a small degree, and also converted a portion of that debt into shares at a sizable premium to market price to reflect the ability of the company's partners willing to restructure the debt. The second kind of chunk of time that I've spent at the company was really focused on evaluating the assets, in particular Copperstone. I had a background actually with Brewery Creek. The mining company I was at previously had an investment in Golden Predator, so I was quite familiar with Brewery Creek and knew that quite extensively. And really what I wanted to get to the bottom of was Copperstone and its actual ability to head towards production. What we have with these two assets, as I said, clear path to production from a restart of the past operations. And what I wanted to do really with Copperstone was consolidate the work that had been done since the PFS in 2018. There was a number of components with post-PFS that really needed working on, in particular the metallurgy, additional infill drilling, as well as engineering. And all of these components had been worked on separately, but never consolidated into one package. And so the first component that I did was really to evaluate what could be done there. And as well as the second tranche was really evaluating the exploration and long-term potential at Copperstone. So soon as coming on board, started consolidating this work, stabilizing the company, and really starting work on an updated study, as I said, to consolidate this work. And what the goal of this was obviously to not only evaluate the feasibility of Copperstone heading towards production and what that actually looks like in the near term, but also consolidating the technical information into one source. If I got to the point where I felt I could recommend the project going into production, then obviously I would need to capitalize and fund the construction of that. And so the diligence that is required upon that and what I've gone through in the past, in past lives to finance and underwrite construction of assets and projects, I knew I needed to actually consolidate that information and put it into one package, which I did do in a updated preliminary economic assessment, or PEA. And we did that and announced that about 4 weeks ago, I believe, on June 20th. So just over 4 weeks, just over a month ago. And really what this resulted in is what I'm looking at as a robust, but small mine, but a robust mine that I feel personally can be the initial building block to producing and a growing company. We did come up with a PEA as opposed to an updated PFS. The main reason for that is it is a potential underground operation, and traditionally what you have with an underground operation is a lot of inferred material. And so when we came up, the first key thing that I wanted to do and said to the team was design the mine plan, right? We've updated infill drilling, we've updated the resource, but really come up with a mine design that is realistic and reflects what you would do in reality if you were headed towards production. And when you do that in real life with underground mines, you include inferred material to a particular degree. And so the fact that I wanted to include inferred material and have that as the basis of our mine design meant we needed to do a PEA because we were including that inferred material. But effectively, the other components with regards to metallurgy, permitting, environmental, the resource are all at a stage that are much beyond a PEA. And so, as I said, we were quite happy with the results, and really, as expected, it is an operation that is, as I described, tight, but has a greater than 5-year mine life with the current resource, but fairly robust economics. And there's 3 reasons for this. The one is the tight resource, as I've said. It's located and constrained in a fairly small area, so you're minimizing development for underground, which makes your overall all-in sustaining cost quite reasonable. There is standard processing methodologies here. There's nothing new. Metallurgy is a whole ore leaching. It's well understood. And you are talking about more than reasonable recoveries of 95% or possibly greater in reality. And the third and most important component is the capital. The capital required to put this into production is quite low because of the pre-existing infrastructure in place already at site. At site, we have surface infrastructure such as the ball mill and crusher, as well as plant works. And other things such as buildings for a gold room and offices and workshops. Underground, we have done significant refurbishment of the underground infrastructure with ventilation and electrical, and has been dewatered for over 2 years. In addition to that, the site is connected to the grid in Arizona, has ample water, has a number of wells at site to provide the water required, and no issues on water rights. And most importantly, we have all permits remaining to go into construction and eventual production. These permits are, and what I will emphasize continuously, is the fact that we are sitting as fully permitted, and there are a minimal number of assets, in particular in the Western United States, let alone in the Americas, with a permit in hand. In addition, the second component I mentioned was exploration. Again, once having evaluated, stabilized the company and then evaluated the company, especially Copperstone project, I then moved on to the exploration potential and just ensuring that the geological potential is not just limited to what we have as a current resource. With the prior open pit workings and having the operations there, it's always showed an excellent continuity of mineralization, and same with the underground workings. The infill drilling that was completed in 2021 and 2022 also returned consistent results, which also improved our geostatistics, which makes our life a little bit easier, to expand our future spacings when we do go underground to drill further. What this allowed us to do is, that allowed me to say, okay, look, there's potential near resource, which is always great. But I obviously wanted to step back and take a look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture for me is really kind of coming up with, really trying to understand what we have. We have a number of zones, as you can see on the slide here, that are near the existing resource, and a number of areas to go, footwall zone, Copperstone, etc. But what I wanted to do is focus on what potential there was outside of the near mine. And so what we have is, we have 5 priority targets that we would like to do for exploration. The first 2, 1 and 2, as I said, they are near the existing resource. But we have these 3 additional targets, which we would like to, expand and look at it, the broader area in the region for us and our land holdings. What I also then moved on to is to say, okay, what have we done historically? This site was in operation for over a decade in effect. And what drilling was done. So there was extensive drilling. So I wanted to know what drilling had been done in these potential target areas that were never followed up on. And what I was pleased to find is there are a number of intercepts that were never followed up on, and these were core intercepts that were never followed up on. In particular, 900 meters southwest of the open pit. And I'll just switch slides, which is this might be a tough one to see, but looking towards the south there, you can see 900 meters southwest of the open pit. And in particular, we had an intercept of 1.5 meters of just over 20 grams per ton. These intercepts were never properly followed up upon, as well as a couple of other zones where we had over 200 grams per ton, over 5 meters, and over 18 grams per ton, again, over 5 meters, really along within the southwest or the south zone along strike. So what this allows me to do is say, look, okay, so Copperstone is feasible to go into production in the near term, i.e. the next 2 years. Also, in addition to that, what comes after? The study that we came up with showed that we had just over a 5.5 year mine life with the existing resource. But really, what would I do to expand that life and that resource to either increase throughput or extend the life overall? And really, what I'm feeling now is I do have a number of opportunities to follow up on to execute on that. So what does that mean? That means I've come in, I've taken a look at Copperstone, and effectively between the 2 assets, I do feel that Copperstone is the lead horse, I would say, between the 2 assets to put our focus on to take the company towards production. I do feel that Copperstone is much more than just a viable asset, but one that if it is just restricted by capital, which again is not an easy hill to climb, but one which I've done in previous lives, and one which I'll then move my focus to. The PEA, as I said, had significant results. Again, all around, well within the parameters of a typical underground mine and operation, which I'm familiar with. But most importantly, what does that reflect on? And if you could take a look at kind of our comparison to other companies within the Western United States, which I do believe is a niche area for us, you can see obviously that our market cap has taken a significant hit in recent periods and really drops us below any other sort of stage of company, whether it's in production, PFS, or similar pre-construction position that these companies are in. So I feel obviously that there is, a lot for us to improve upon and work towards, increasing the overall valuation. So effectively, as I've said, come in focused on stabilizing the company, focused on next steps. And what are those next steps post PEA? Well, the first thing we need to do is file the tech reports, which we're going to get done in the next couple of weeks for Copperstone, and then we will move on to a number of straightforward pieces of work at site. We are not capitalized for construction as of yet, but I'm going to continue on with work there, which will include, some simple trade-off studies for the processing plant. I will continue to evaluate options for used equipment, which I do find are readily available within the United States and Mexico. I will get my team started on earthworks. There's a number of earthworks contained within this PEA that I would like to actually switch and take internally to save costs, because I'm paying I'm paying my team to be there. I may as well put them to work on a few other areas. And ideally, what I will be able to do is start and further the exploration plans and start drilling at site. My background, if you don't have a drill rig, going and turning at the time, you are not feeding the future. And so I heavily believe that drilling to varying degrees, you always have to have a drill rig operating and continuing to feed, the future. In addition, the third kind of chunk, as I've looked at things when I joined the company, first being stabilizing, second looking at the projects and seeing what we have. The third conversation is really one of execution on these projects and execution really on the remaining part of my balance sheet. So our balance sheet is less than ideal. It is still sitting with the debt. It is still sitting with a stream on Copperstone, which is less than ideal. And so what I've been doing is engaging in discussions with those partners to see what we can do to reorganize and restructure the balance sheet. And I would hope that in the coming months that I could be coming out with a restructured balance sheet, which would really enable me to execute on the capital raise required for Copperstone to put that into production. And so I will continue those conversations with them and potential JV partners to see what I can do to underwrite those costs, as well as, explore other monetization opportunities. The company is just, besides these two assets, still has some other non-core assets, which we will continue to evaluate options for and see if we can minimize any dilution outside of a restructuring to allow us to continue on with spending and development costs at Copperstone. In addition, we have Brewery Creek, which is a significant asset for us, as I mentioned. It is, as I've said, the second horse in our race and what we're backing. And that is as we are at a permitting stage, which will take multiple years. We just entered the third phase of a 5-phase process with regards to Brewery Creek. And we do feel that we can obviously take that towards production as well, but it's on a much different timeline. Could be, it's its own quantifiable project, with an excellent PEA that was done on it. Sorry, I just clicked on the wrong slide there. But which returns sizable returns as well, which we would then continue to focus on. So not only do we feel that we have, a potential production within the next 2 years, we also feel that we can amplify that potentially with a second asset, which is Brewery Creek, to take that towards production as well, post Copperstone. With that, I will look. I've got some questions that have already come in here. Thank you for everybody, which is great to see. I have a question here. Sorry, I won't mention people's names, but there was a question about the progress and how's the financing going at Copperstone. Obviously, I've mentioned about the work that we're doing at Copperstone. But with regard to the financings, I continue to have ongoing conversations with potential debt underwriters and, to a lesser degree, potential JV partners, just to see what options may exist. I will, it is with debt markets being the way they're at. It is not a cheap time with interest rates. So I'm looking to be as creative as I can. And so JV partners are also on the list for folks to actually come in to see what can be done there. Follow-on question from that is, are there any large financial institutions interested in investing over $30 million US to get the Copperstone mine producing high-grade gold? As I just mentioned, continue on with conversations. I would say for a project this size and for for the amount of gold and the amount of capex, i.e., sub $100 million in terms of initial construction costs. Most of my conversations are with mid-sized financial institutions. Larger financial institutions are looking for, over 100 million to invest in terms of initial construction costs. And so my conversations are being held with, mid-sized or smaller companies to allow these conversations on construction capital. Eventually, what could happen is if you do put Copperstone in production and do show an extension on life, refinancing of that debt to better terms could potentially be had with larger institutions, but they're not looking to underwrite tickets under 100 million at the moment. Further questions: how are things progressing with the Brewery Creek mines and the permitting authority? As I mentioned, we are in the third stage of five-stage process that the Yukon Territory has in place. What I would project is that it is a 2 to 3 year process remaining on that permitting process, and a few $1 million, i.e., $2 to $2.5 million, to continue on with that process. And we will continue to invest money accordingly. Primarily, activities would occur in 2024, though. Right now, we are looking at consolidating pre-existing data and baseline data and evaluating kind of a gap analysis and getting that back to the permitting authority, followed up by entering the next stage, which would entail us getting into more expensive activities, community relations, etc. Another question: when do you estimate the time frame if you start construction until production? Depending on that construction decision date, we would look at a process of 15 to 18 months to take it into production, including the commissioning time period. As I said, with the existing infrastructure in place, the longest lead items would be the ball mill and the refurbishment of existing equipment there, or processing equipment. So really, that would be the longest lead items. But again, if I'm able to bring any capital in the short term, that would be the first item that I would likely invest in to eliminate the timeline on that and look to condense that as much as possible. Sorry, just a few repeat questions here. Another question here is milestones for the next 12 months. Milestones for the next few months. So the first thing I'm working on at the moment is additional recapitalization of the company. What I would like to be able to say in the next 3 months is, bringing in additional capital, as well as restructuring the balance sheet, particularly with regards to Copperstone and the streaming and royalty liabilities on the project. This would all be with the goal of effectively making the project more attractive to potential debt underwriters and/or JV partners. And so that would be the main goal for the next in the very immediate term. And then also in the next 6 months, I would like to continue on with de-risking activities to lessen the timeline to production once a construction decision is made for Copperstone. Move on to the next question. Somebody's asked if I can share a few names of institutional shareholders who make up it's a large portion of Sabre ownership. We have a number of folks in Toronto in particular, as well as a few folks in Vancouver who are holdovers legacies from the Arizona Gold holdings. And effectively they're the usual folks primarily at CIBC. We also have insider ownership primarily driven from 2 directors and who are also the debt holders of the company. Further question here about valuation. Somebody's just asking about, how do I see the valuation of the company? As I meant, as I have on the one slide, we have asset value of approximately, just over 20 million. I see that as effectively about 0.1 times NAV of our assets, probably less if you start to include the royalty that we have on the Three Aces project owned by Seabridge, as well as future deferred payments from our option properties. So I would say that we're trading under 0.1 times NAV currently, whereas junior developers and explorers currently are trading anywhere between 0.1 to 0.7 times NAV, probably with an average closer of 0.25 to 0.3 times NAV. So my goal in the next 12 months is really to take that valuation, take it out from below 0.1 times NAV and see if, do my best to get that up to a more peer, a similar level to my peers of about about 0.3 times. That would be the ideal deal plan here. Further question is about the Blue Pearls target near the Copperstone mine. Blue Pearls is probably the most long, it's the less technically known target out of the 5 targets. It is further away. It doesn't have a number of drill targets and intercepts to back that up. But geologically, the geological potential of what's been evaluated by the geological team, both prior and current, has always felt Blue Pearls is an item to explore. I'll be digging into that further as well, and as I said, in furthering our exploration plans, and then winnowing that down to prioritizing the targets to see what we could do there. Currently, exploration plans there would primarily consist of underground, which is very expensive to pay for underground development. And so what I'm looking to do is, I've got a bit of a background having run a couple of programs with regards to a wedge program and dealing with folks who have had that experience. And so what I'm looking to do is seeing what I can do with wedge drilling, which would help to minimize the cost or reduce that cost and not having to need the underground development to access the targets. And so we'll continue to do that, prioritize the targets, work with the drilling providers, see if the ground is an ideal host to a wedge program, and making sure that that's low risk enough, and execute exploration plans, hopefully with a wedge program within the next 12 months. Well, hopefully within the next 6 to 8 months, actually, but within the next year. So just a question here about de-risking activities for Copperstone. Just asking, what would be available to us. So there are a number of trade-off studies, in particular with regards to the process plant. There's ways about evaluating whether you can reduce hosting time, and in particular, if you could reduce the tank size, and then allow for quicker processing, and either save either on capex or opex. That's always the trade-off. And so we'll continue on with those. They're fairly low-cost exercises, i.e., a few $1,000s in a few weeks. We'll also continue to evaluate, mill refurbishment. I've continued to look at refurbishing the mill and the crusher. I will evaluate. There's some cheap alternatives to some mills as well, which I will look to do as well. The primary de-risking activities that will really be about whether or not I can do earthworks, in particular with regards to the pit laydown areas and contouring that myself, or I might have my team contour it, as well as what I could do with regards to prepping material for the eventual expansion of the pre-existing tailings facilities that are there, which would be needed, within the third year of production. The used operating equipment would be the other component. A number of contacts in the industry, and I'll continue to look at what options exist for used processing plant and equipment. I do feel that there's always the opportunity to source that and drastically reduce the costs, as well as the timelines to the construction of the process plant. I think that captures all of the questions. I've talked quite a bit there, but we have stabilized the company, which is fantastic. I've been pleased with the progress. So I'm getting some comments. I understand about suit and tie, folks, and I appreciate the advice. But we are busy, as I said, now hitting the ground and really ensuring that the company is set up for success in the near future, and really taking this to production in the near term. Happy to chat with anybody further and take them through, any finer granular details with regards to the projects, both Brewery Creek and Copperstone, and take them through my plans for the next coming months. And I'd like to thank everybody for their time today. Take care.